Have you ever wondered if what's affecting you in your marriage is really a communication or a disconnection problem, or if maybe hormones might be part of the story? Today, we're joined by Dr. Gretchen Reis, an integrative medicine physician and founder of Integrity Wellness MD. She specializes in hormone health, perimenopause, menopause, thyroid health, and metabolic wellness. Dr. Reis helps men and women understand what's actually happening in their bodies so they can function in an optimal way. And in this episode, we're talking about something that doesn't get discussed enough, and that's how hormonal shifts in midlife can affect our moods, energy, intimacy, and even our marriage. This is a conversation every midlife couple needs to hear. Hey, everybody. I am so excited about this episode.
We are so
We are both excited, yes, because we get to introduce you to the woman next to God himself and my husband that has provided me my sanity, my mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And so she is a great physician, and I don't know where I would be without her, if I'm being honest. And so, friends,
we would be.
Yeah. That is true. That's fair. I'll give you that. So this is my doctor, Dr. Gretchen Reis. She is my go-to for all things hormones, and she is just going to give us a wealth of information and answer all the questions all around perimenopause, menopause, hormone health for both women and men, because men deal with this stuff too. But yeah, I'm going to be real, and we're going to primarily talk about the women here because I think it is different.
Yeah, and that's a good point, though. But look, if you're a man who has a wife who might be experiencing perimenopause, menopause, this is important for you to know. Don't write this off. Oh, okay, this is just for no. No, you're going to want to understand this information.
That's right. So we're glad to have you, Dr. Reis. And so would you just tell everybody a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Sure. I'd be glad to. And thank you so much for the opportunity to come on and talk with you guys. You are such a special, wonderful couple anointed by God. And it just shines through in everything that you do. So it's my pleasure to take care of people like you guys.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. But yeah, thank you so much for asking me to talk about this subject, because as you well know, this is my passion. This is my ministry. I feel like this is a lane God has called me to. But as a physician, I came out of the world of primary care, practiced in Pennsylvania and Ohio, and moved around a bit, and got led to go into the study of functional medicine, and in particular, bioidentical hormones back in 2008, 2009. So I shifted into that field, and then after several years of really increasing my knowledge, had the opportunity to come to Charlotte to open up my practice, which is where I met you guys. And so I was been able to transition from doing primary care, which I loved, into something that I think it's just so powerful, and it's vastly under-recognized in traditional medicine. Partly because insurance just won't pay for this type of in-depth care where you're getting to the root cause of issues. So there's a financial component to it. But traditional medicine oftentimes just doesn't know how to think outside the box. And, I think that a lot of things are changing, and we're seeing some positive trends where there's a lot more interest into root causes and nutrition, and how do we really fix something instead of using a pill.
Right.
But hormone balance is just so crucial to all of that. So that's why I've pretty much dedicated my career to identifying hormone issues and then fixing them in the most safe, natural way that we can. So you don't have to go on Prozac and statins for cholesterol and blood pressure medicines and all these other things that are in the traditional world. Sometimes we can't avoid those things, and they're helpful. But if we can correct things that are imbalanced when you're younger, say in your upper 30s or 40s, then that can make such a huge life-changing difference when you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s. And there's not enough doctors that are really focusing on that. So that's what I love to do.
There really isn't. And I want to talk about that in a minute here. But first, that's about when I came to you in, I think, late 30s and maybe early 40s. But I remember just being at the stage of my life where I'm still feeling pretty young and vibrant. And all of a sudden, I'm just walking around with my head in the cloud. and I'm like, I don't even, I've lost motivation. I'm just in a funk. I've never been somebody who struggled with depression or anything like that, but I just felt like I can't even put my thoughts together. And so when I started, I'm a Google girl. Which I know you doctors love it when your patients are Googlers.
Oh, and now it's Chat GPT. I
Yes.
Chat GPT'd my symptoms.
Yes. And I started looking, I'm like, maybe it's hormone related. And that's how I found you. I mean, that's where Google was a big benefit for me, because I found you and I reached out to you, and it was just a game changer for me. And so for years, and I want you to talk about some of these things, because you did lab work and all that and put me on progesterone and testosterone, which I would have not even known. And I want to talk about that too. I want to talk about all the things, but that was just a game changer for me. And I stayed on that. And I've met with you all through the years, and I stayed on that and had this great maintenance with it until, what was it, about last year, so where I started falling apart, and back to again,
2 years.
I don't know what's going on with me. And I would have and I kept telling you about anxiety, and not just your typical anxiety where it feels in your head and you're worried. It's more my body was like going, there's an emergency and you've got to get out of here. And so it was just that it felt very physiological. And so we've gone down that road, and that's when you give me my estrogen patch. And I love that. I love that. And so that has helped me dramatically. But I can honestly say, like, going through this, I couldn't imagine going, because this was like a 15-year process here for me. I couldn't imagine going through this without, your help. And I think
Me neither.
I know. And I think, primarily for Christians, do you think it's a little harder for Christian women to even reach out for this help, because they feel like, well, and they're even told this is natural, and they'll go to their doctors, to your point. It's like, well, this is your process. This is what women go through. But I don't think that means we should suffer through anything. And so I think some women feel like, I just need stronger faith. I need to pray more.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to change your hormones. So what was going on, like, with my body when it comes to, like, what are the big key players when it comes to your hormonal health?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I love how you're asking it from the perspective of the Christian, in particular, in this case, in the Christian woman. Because a lot of times we feel like if we have to take a pill or go see a doctor, it's a lack of faith.
Yes.
And the way that I like to approach it is when you really kind of zoom out and look at our health now compared to 20 years ago, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, we live in a much different world. You think about the type of environment people had back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. Nobody was eating Doritos, and they weren't going to Chick-fil-A for lunch.
Right.
They were eating regular food that they milked the cow and, got the chicken for dinner. So everybody was eating healthy foods, and they didn't live in an environment that was filled with toxins. And so what's happened during the 20th century was that our physiology has changed, because we're just affected by all these factors. So we get toxins in our world that gets into our system, and that affects our body's ability to create normal hormones throughout our lifespan. So that's the first thing. So our bodies are different because of the result of sin in this world. And so a lot of us at, say, age 40 don't have as much progesterone as our mothers and our grandmothers did at that age. So as you, in this case in particular, what you're talking about is the perimenopausal period, which is typically anywhere from, can be 2 up to 8 or 9 years before menopause. Hormones start to shift, and almost always progesterone starts to go down. And then alongside with that, oftentimes there's a drop in testosterone. And you can still have normal periods every month. You might have more PMS, but you're still having your periods. So if you see your gynecologist, they're going to say, oh, you're fine. I'll put you on the pill. Well, that doesn't solve anything.
Right.
Just
Right.
blunts everything. But that's all they do. And they never check hormone levels. They just say, well, you've got to have enough estrogen, so you're normal. Well, normal is not optimal. And especially
Right.
in God's sense, because God wants us to be as healthy as Adam and Eve were in the garden. And that's what we're striving for. So when you think about it, if progesterone and testosterone are low throughout your 40s, typical things you're going to experience is increased PMS. So that
Mm-hmm.
7 to 10 days beforehand, it's like, here she. This is where the husband says, "Oh
Yes.
boy, she's ramping up.
Yes.
Buckle in.
I'm I'm gonna go in my room and go watch football." So you definitely get those brain changes.
Mm-hmm.
And then also periods can start to be unreliable, where you don't know when you're going to get them, and they might be irregular, get it spotting in between. And then sometimes it's just the physical feelings of fluid retention, bloating. And as a woman, when you feel bloated, you just feel fat and puffy and ugly and not
Yes.
sexy. And I don't want to be around anybody. Let me put on, my pajamas and my fuzzy slippers, and, I'm going to go watch Hallmark or something.
Yes.
But that's what happens when your brain hormones are imbalanced.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course we all know the biggest benefit of testosterone therapy is helping sexual health, which I know we're going to get into in more detail.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
as testosterone drops through your 40s, women just tend to have less desire, less drive. Usually if the man, the husband, is about the same age, his drive is going to be higher than hers. Now,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, men's drive drops as they get older and older, but in the 40s, most men still have a pretty good sex drive.
Yeah.
And then suddenly she's just not interested. And it can also be related to the fact that she's just not getting turned on as much, and it's not him. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
she has vaginal dryness. She doesn't have the same blood flow, and it's just
Mm.
not as pleasurable for her.
And
So
she's not sleeping well.
exactly, that's the
Mm-hmm.
other thing too that's associated
Mm-hmm.
with those hormone imbalances. You don't sleep well, and then you're tired during the day, and then you're grumpy, and then before you know it, you have this snowball of symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
and it can really be a mess. And if no doctor is really asking the right questions, and I believe doing some appropriate testing, you're never going to get it
Mm-hmm.
identified and treated.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. And so, I mean, let's go ahead and segue into that because there's a lot of women who, one, they don't understand. And I hope this episode like brings awareness that it's because some women, we like blame ourselves a lot. And we think,
Mm.
well, I
Mhm.
should be able to handle this because I always have. I shouldn't be feeling this way.
My mom did. I don't ever
Yes.
remember my mom going through this.
Yes, or my friends.
Mhm.
And so we start thinking there's something wrong with us where
Mhm.
it really can be. And I hope women are hearing that like you've got to get hormones checked here because some of these things are beyond your control because they are physiological, changes that are going on. And so I want women to hear that. But also there is an element like of women that fear hormone replacement therapy or they fear
Mm.
these things.
Mhm.
And like some of that has come from the medical community,
Mhm.
some faulty research that has been done. And so I want to do some myth busting a little bit first. And one, let's talk about this one. For Christians, this is God's plan. I mean, He designed us to go through menopause. So why should we not just be allowing this natural process to take place and just suffer right through
Dive
it?
in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a great one. And I do occasionally get that concern from some of the new patients that I see coming in. And I think it's a good question because we should all strive to live by the word and follow after God. And if God
Mm-hmm.
created something in a certain way, then we should follow after that. However, again, it goes back to what I was saying. I think that you have to understand that we live in a world that's just very different than in previous
Mm-hmm.
generations, and we are fighting a battle. There's so many forces coming against us, not only in the spiritual, but it crosses over
Mm-hmm.
into the physical, that
Mm-hmm.
make our health more and more precious and hard to attain. And so the way that I look at it is God created us to have a certain amount of hormones with some cycling of estrogen and progesterone through the month from
Mm-hmm.
say, your age 12 until age 50. We'll just pick those
Mm-hmm.
two ages. And that's the way God created us to be. And we're supposed to bear children and raise families during all that time. That's
Mm-hmm.
God's plan. But when the world messes up that chemistry, then
Mm.
I don't think that there's anything wrong with trying to
Mm.
restore what God wants us to be and to have. And so
Oh,
it's a
I
tool.
love that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. What? Yeah, I. That's huge.
Yeah.
Well, even then, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say the other thing too is that's the way I look at it up through perimenopause and into menopause is we shouldn't have to suffer with all these symptoms until menopause, But then if you look at it too beyond menopause, this gets into one of the other myths about hormones is up until recently, every woman was told, well, you can go on hormones, but only for about 5 years, and then we're going to try to get you off.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's still a common belief. Now, fortunately, in recent months, the FDA has stepped up with Dr. McCary, and they've changed that so that now there is no longer this blanket statement that you have to stop hormones after 5 years. Because hormones are a very, very powerful way to maintain your health through your 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. And that's what I tell a lot of women also. It's, I can put you on hormones. I can treat your hot flashes with estrogen. We can make you feel better. And you're going to think I'm the greatest doctor ever. But one of the other more profound underlying reasons to do hormones around menopause going forward is because it lowers your risk of those diseases of aging, like
Yeah.
dementia, osteoporosis, broken hip at 72, heart disease, and even now there's data it lowers your risk for some cancers. So there's very powerful anti-aging benefits to going on hormones at menopause and continuing indefinitely for years. So, and I look at it too that, of course, back in Abraham's day, people lived hundreds and hundreds of years. We don't live 800 years anymore. But your life shouldn't be over when you're 50 or 52. So
Right.
if we have the average lifespan for a woman of 82 and a half years old, let's optimize it. Let's
Yes.
let you play with your grandkids and play pickleball and go out to lunch with the ladies and do all these fun things in your golden years. And hormones are a big
Yeah.
part of that.
Yeah, and
that's fantastic. No, I just wanted to assert because even when you were bringing up the idea of for the Christian women and how I think unfortunately things get looked at in categories going, well, this is not okay, but this is okay. Case in point, both you and I are wearing glasses. I don't think at one point in time have I ever thought, oh, well, I just don't have enough faith in God. And so I, if I had enough faith, I wouldn't go, to the optometrist to get to check my prescription. Right. And I think that's widely accepted and nobody has any kind of problems with that whatsoever. It's still a physical condition. It's still an age deterioration of our eyes for most of us, that starts to create a need for assistance. And, I don't see why that's any more
Different.
biblical or any different than
Right.
doing this. It's just, it's not introducing actually even something where glasses actually, I'm even introducing something foreign where, bioidentical hormones, we're just continuing what God designed the body to do.
And that's a really good point too, because I do find that there's a lot of misconceptions about that term bioidentical. People don't fully understand that. And they think that everything bioidentical is, for example, a compounded prescription and you can't get bioidenticals at CVS, and that's not true. But bioidentical means the product that you're either applying or putting into your body is exactly the same as the molecule God created and designed to work in your hormone receptors. So we are just restoring natural levels of those naturally God-given designed hormones that we're supposed to have. But, like the glasses, we start to do this when we hit 45, presbyopia.
Jamie loves when I do that.
yeah.
Yeah. Or gray hair. Which-
Yes.
And, there's things that happen in our modern world with aging. Arthritis. Let's just say, you're working construction for 30 years and then your knees go bad. Is that a lack of faith? No. It's
Yeah.
because your
Yeah.
knees are worn out. So all of those things are just different consequences of living in the world we live in. And they're not moral failures, they're not spiritual failures. But if there's something that we can do that is natural and safe and it can restore us back to the function that God designed for us to have, that's where I don't see a problem with that.
Yeah.
Agreed.
And we should. And I think, it's so unfortunate that there was this big fear factor, put in the treatment of this. And so the things you were talking about, how, it can prevent against some kind of cancers and heart disease and osteoporosis. These were things like we had been told that no, get off of it quickly because it causes cancer and because it causes heart disease. But what you're saying now is that the new research, the current research we have, it's the exact opposite. It's not even just that it debunked it, it proved it to be the exact opposite.
Yes, exactly. And that's just been so exciting over recent years. Because when I did start studying bioidentical hormones, 15, 16 years ago, we were very careful for women who had either had breast cancer or a family history or some concern. Because as you're referring to, it was the Women's Health Initiative study came out in 2002. And that was the study, and without going into the details of how it was rather poorly designed, on the surface, it seemed to show that you had a higher risk of heart disease and breast cancer if you were on hormones. Turns out, because they weren't studying it, they just didn't put it together well. And it wasn't bioidentical hormones. So I remember when that happened, because immediately we stopped refilling everybody's prescription for hormones, and women
got scared,
screaming, "Oh yes, take me off of it!" And then of course they're having all the hot flashes and getting brain fog and
Fun
all
times.
those problems. Yeah, it was a big deal. But you're absolutely right. What's happened is that the data from that study has been reanalyzed a number of times, and unfortunately, the new conclusions, which are very positive, don't get front page billing, and no one ever hears about it. But it turns out that estrogen therapy probably lowers your risk of breast cancer. It doesn't increase it. And also, if you start hormones around menopause and you don't wait until you're 75, there is a lower risk of heart disease and strokes. Who'd have thunk? So the data is there that it actually has that positive benefit, but there's still a lot of confusion that's out there, and a lot of people still think that, for example, I heard estrogen causes cancer and I don't want to get breast cancer because I have 3 aunts that had breast cancer. And that is not based on any sort of correct, valid data.
And so estrogen has so many more benefits than just, because I think what's correlated with it is hot flashes. But it's actually like so beneficial for all of these other things. And so I think that's very important information that we need to be aware of. But also I want to talk about testosterone for a minute, because I think majority of people think that's a man's thing. That, like, women, I mean, I don't even know how many women are aware, that we also need to be monitoring our testosterone levels.
Yeah, testosterone. The interesting thing is that first made the news back in probably in the late 90s. I was in my first practice, and Oprah had somebody on the show. I think it had a doctor on the show who was
Oprah started a lot of things.
She did. Yeah. Testosterone cream for women. And I remember the women would come in and start asking, and I was, the newbie in the practice. And of course the director of the practice said, "No, we're not prescribing that stuff." So I couldn't do anything. And then of course we were told to tell people, "Oh, it's dangerous. You're going to grow a mustache, hair in your chest. We can't do that." So the traditional medical establishment, the reaction to that years ago was, "Oh, we can't do that." So that fed into some of these testosterone phobias. But yes, we have definitely learned that testosterone is in the mix. And I will just pause to say that a lot of times women say, "Well, what does progesterone do? What does estrogen do? What does testosterone do?" And I tell them it's like that famous or infamous Venn diagram. They're all overlapping, and you can't really tease them apart. However, testosterone has 3 main benefits that are very powerful. The first one is, of course, on sexual health. Sex drive, sexual arousal. It just, without testosterone, Suzanne Summers once said, if you don't have testosterone, she said, sex is like having a smoothie. You could do it, but you're just not going to really enjoy it. So, it's just like one more thing to do. Sure, we'll go have sex. But with testosterone, it's like, woo, this is great. So sexual health. The second thing is it has a powerful brain boosting effect. So testosterone boosts dopamine in the brain, which is, of course, the neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward.
Yes.
And it gives you that sense of motivation and focus. And I'd like to say that you can tell your testosterone is good is if for women, if your husband wakes you up at 7:00 on a Saturday morning and says, "Hey, honey, let's clean out the garage today. It's going to be great. It'll take all day, but we'll get pizza for dinner." And if you just roll over and say, "Ain't no way," you don't have enough testosterone. But if you say, "You know what? I'll go make the coffee. Let's get out there," then you
Yes.
probably have testosterone because those big tasks seem very possible and you can tackle them.
Yes. And that's what, when you first put me on it, that was the change I noticed. That was the thing that it corrected, because I was like, I don't have motivation or drive to do anything. It's like, I just don't even care. And so I was losing that excitement and that drive and motivation. And it came right back. And like, it was a big game changer. So it's not just for men. What are you, he's
It's
gonna
not
say
just for
something
men.
here.
So
What are you gonna say?
so if we come back in and you boost her testosterone, you're saying that I can get her to help clean the garage?
Absolutely.
I see, men. Men, I hope you've been paying attention. Hope we've been sticking here. No, I just
No, no, but like you were talking
it
too,
does
like
make
the
a difference.
sexual component, that is a big one as well.
Yes.
Because, like, as marriage counselors, you want to have a healthy sexual, relationship. And so that is important. And for it to be pleasurable and not just be this task that you're doing out of obligation. And it's like, that helps you lower stress. And I know you've got a new book coming out soon about stress, which is going to be great. And we'll definitely have you back for that. But, having a good sexual relationship, that helps you with stress. I mean, you've got some good hormones flowing out of that. And
Yes.
like, it's really essential. It's a big part of your relationship.
It is, and that's the way it was designed to be. So, of course, sexual intimacy it's an image of our relationship with God, how we come together. And that's why God created it to be something so beautiful and so wonderful and so pleasurable. But as we know, sin entered the world and things go awry quite
Yeah.
often. But you're absolutely right. A healthy sex life is important for women, and a lot of it has to do with just the intimacy in the marriage. But after you reach orgasm, oxytocin is released from your brain, and oxytocin is that hormone of attachment and bonding. So that just furthers things. And so the more you have sex, the more you want to have sex, assuming all of
Yeah.
your hormones are balanced and you have good vaginal health. But it does also have those other benefits where it fights against high cortisol. So it helps your adrenals, your brain and your adrenals work better and in sync. And then it's also anti-inflammatory too. So when you have all of these things working together, it helps other aspects of your metabolism. So
Yeah,
you're
that's
right.
great. I mean, that's like setting yourself up for optimal health. And I want to touch on this because we did talk about it a little bit. And then I also think it's a common treatment that many women will come in with these, perimenopausal symptoms, and they'll be put on an antidepressant. And I think by all means, speak with your doctor. And if you need, there's nothing, if you need it, they have their time and place.
Is this a good time for a disclaimer?
Right, it is. Because you don't hear us say get off your antidepressants.
This is not a substitute for a personal relationship with your doctor or physician.
Exactly.
That's right.
Always follow your physician's advice.
Right. But what that comes down to, it's like an antidepressant won't regulate your hormones.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also there are side effects such as lower libido, weight gain, a whole slew of side effects for antidepressants. And so in some situations, that's not like that shouldn't be your first go-to.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Unfortunately, most primary care physicians, they can only really do one of two things. They can either put you on an antidepressant or put you on a birth control pill. So those are kind of like the two things that they do. And it's because they just, many of them are just wonderful people and they really do want to help. They just haven't been trained to identify these hormone
Right.
issues. But absolutely, if there is a hormonal component to the mood swings, in particular, if it's much worse those 7 to 10 days before your period, that is just a warning sign that is probably lack of progesterone, because you're not supposed to have a lot of progesterone the first half of the cycle. But after ovulation, which is around days, 12, 13, 14, then we're supposed to get this peak of progesterone that happens, and then it comes down as you get your period. But as we age, we may not be making as much progesterone, and one of the symptoms is irritability, anxiety, and depression. So that is a clue that even if Prozac would work, and it does have some efficacy for PMDD, is that really the root cause? And I would say no, the root cause
Yeah.
could very well be lack of progesterone. So there are other ways to treat that.
So really what we're doing is, or what you're doing, not us, but so what you're doing is actually trying to look at root causes instead of just symptom treat.
Yes, exactly. And that's what a lot of Christians really like. They want to get to the root cause and to treat naturally. They don't necessarily want to take pills. So, so yeah. Now, and again, according to your disclaimer, there are definitely times that I have patients that are on antidepressants, whether it's from primary care or psychiatry, and I don't ever stop them. I say, let's just keep you on what you've been using because it seems to have helped, and let's start working with the hormones, and then we can reassess. And then at that point, if you're doing better, then work with your doctor to talk about, is there a chance you can wean off of these medications? So I never just switch somebody from traditional to hormones right away. We blend them and then see if we can wean down on the others.
So, do you suggest, because like I am blessed enough to have access to you, but if you're not in the Carolina areas and stuff, what kind of doctor should these women who are struggling be looking for? Like, do they start with their OB just to, start there, or do they look for an integrative medicine doctor or like what should they be looking for help?
It's a great question, and my answer is kind of changed a little bit from a couple years ago, because honestly now with Bobby Kennedy, the head of HSS, and McCary, and some of the changes that we've seen in terms of government agencies removing restrictions on hormones, there are more conventional gynecologists that are willing to start to do this. So if you, for example, first example, if you're going into menopause and you're starting to get the hot flashes, brain fog, vaginal dryness, those are symptoms that gynecologists oftentimes can treat, and they can and oftentimes will use bioidentical hormones. So let's say you see your, Dr. Smith, your gynecologist, and they'll put you on a patch, and then there is a bioidentical progesterone pill. So if you can access that and your gynecologist is, comfortable doing it, that's a very good option. The issue is if you're perimenopausal, if you're significantly younger and you're still having normal periods, they're probably almost for sure not going to do any testing. Almost for sure wouldn't even consider testosterone. So that's where you have to look for a doctor like me who's kind of gone outside of the system. And in some states, in particular out west, there are naturopathic doctors who can prescribe and who they do treat with hormones. So, for example, Arizona is a state that naturopaths, as far as I'm aware, if I'm still current on this, they can still prescribe. So, some places out west you can do that. So, naturopathic physicians, or sometimes you do just have to seek out an MD or a DO like myself who has specialized training in bioidentical hormones. And the one thing I will say is make sure that they do give you enough time to really go through all of your history, and that, ask them about, do you do hormone testing? Because if you don't get really convincing answers for either of those things, they're probably not going to give you the time and attention that you need.
Okay, now you just reminded me of that, because with the hormone testing, I have heard lots of women in response, say, well, I've talked to my doctor about that, but they said the tests aren't really going to be relevant because your hormones, we are going through this, roller coaster ride. And so what is the deal with that? Like, because it seems like there's a little bit of truth to that, but how does that work out with like testing your hormones? How can that be beneficial?
It's beneficial when you get the right test done and it's interpreted by a practitioner like myself who has experience. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. But it's a valid concern that you can say, all right, urinary testing isn't good for this hormone in this form, and you should use saliva testing. And then there's people say, well, you can't use saliva testing for this. You need to use blood. So there's urinary testing, blood testing, saliva testing, and they all have pros and cons. They're all pretty good if you're not on hormones, but once you go on hormones, it depends whether you're on a cream or a pill or an injection or a pellet or a patch. So there's a lot of complexity to doing the appropriate follow-up testing for the forms of hormones that you're on. And I do say also, to speak to that other point, that hormone levels do fluctuate, especially over the course of your menstrual cycle, for sure. But we are always tempted to say, oh, your testosterone is 20, this is low. And we assume that it's 20 all the time, not realizing it might be 40 next week because, maybe you've ovulated and it's going up mid-cycle and then it comes back down to 20. But that's true with any lab. So if you go to your regular doctor and you get, for example, a blood sugar done, it's going to be a lot different if you're fasting versus you just went to Chick-fil-A. So, these levels do oftentimes fluctuate. And that's where you need to make sure that your physician has some experience in interpreting these. And unfortunately, that's where people are oftentimes driven outside of the insurance-based system. and then they
Right.
have to pay to see physicians that don't take insurance. But it's a trade-off, because what you're getting for that
Hmm.
is someone who knows what tests to do and knows what to
Mm.
do with the results.
Yeah, and we are talking about like your well-being,
Hmm.
because to go through this, like I said in the beginning, like I couldn't imagine going through this without getting the hormone replacement therapy.
Mm.
And so it's like we have, and this stuff, like going through perimenopause and menopause, it absolutely can affect your marriage.
Oh yeah.
It affects you as a person. It begins, I mean, you start questioning everything. You don't feel like you're yourself at all. Your husband is highly irritable, now, or he's not irritable, he's irritating. That's the word. your husband.
Well, yeah, because he's sitting over there breathing.
Right.
Right.
He's breathing wrong.
Right. And you're not sleeping. And now all of a sudden you're not comfortable in your own body. You're not happy in
Hmm.
your marriage. You're losing all these pleasures. And so if you need to go out of network and save some money somewhere else, I mean,
Hmm.
I think that's worth it if that's what you have to do. And I think the more we do this, hopefully, like you're saying, the research is starting to be working in our favor, and the medical community is becoming more and more aware, because women should be able to get, this kind of help. And so I would just suggest, like, don't allow yourself to be anxious or depressed or have mood swings and no sleep and
Right.
irritability and unnecessary weight gain and all of these things. Those are too high of a cost to
Hmm.
pay.
Well, yeah, that's exactly. I mean, like you're saying, yeah, they might have to invest monies elsewhere or otherwise, but what's the cost? What's the cost to your health, your well-being, your mental health, your relational health? I mean, what's it drawing away from you if you're unable to do and perform daily functional things because of this? Well, what's that taking away from you or keeping you from being able to make?
Well,
Right.
think about how much, people put aside in their 401k with every paycheck.
Hmm.
And, people in their 30s and 40s are piling up this big pile of money so that they can enjoy it when they're 65. What if you've had a stroke? What if you've had
Hmm.
a heart attack, or if you've gone through cancer and chemo, and you've had 15 years in the interim, which has really destroyed maybe your marriage or had ripple
Right.
effects on your children? Then you're piling up all this money for a retirement that you want to be golden and beautiful, but if you're paying the price all those intervening years, what's that money really for? So if you
Yeah.
invest a small portion of it into your health when you're young and keep your longevity and the
Hmm.
all that focus on healthy aging and functionality into your 60s, 70s, and 80s, that's kind of what the money is for. So
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
do look at it as just a diversion of a little bit of the retirement funding, but it's
Hmm.
you get benefits now and into the future.
Compounding
Yeah.
interest.
No, that
Yes.
that is so great. And so, like, if you're a woman going through this, don't suffer through this. And if you
Yeah.
go to your doctor and you hit a brick wall with that,
Mhm.
find another one. Find another one. And
Absolutely.
so advocate for yourself. So hear that this is not, it's not necessary for you to have to suffer to this degree. So now I want to shift it over a little bit
Yeah.
and give the men a little bit of
That's
time.
right. Let's talk about the guys.
Let's talk about the guys. Go
Husbands,
ahead, honey.
thanks for hanging out. And wives, this is important for you to understand about your husband too, because look,
It is.
we've talked about a lot of hormone shifting with women, but you also mentioned, Dr. Reis, how that's going to happen to men as well. It happens differently, and certainly it's exacerbated by the changes in our diets or what's considered food.
The stuff they're calling
They're
food
calling
nowadays.
food. But and you brought up a good point, as far as men could become irritable, it's just so you listed kind of certain things that will happen to women. What happens to men when their testosterone starts to dip?
And men aren't talking about this, by the way.
Oh,
The
not
girls will
usually.
get together and sometimes we'll talk about our symptoms. Men kind of, it seems like they would withdraw from this or start to feel inadequate and just go silent and just kind of check out.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a very common reaction. And I think a lot of it is because men are wired to just be providers and be in control. And
Hmm.
they're, at least the good men have a sense of responsibility. I just got to get all this stuff done. It's really hard for them to admit that maybe they're not reaching those goals and they're not being as productive as they're supposed to be. So
Mm.
it's, to some degree, it's a sense of weakness. But yeah, when men's testosterone drops, It's usually quite gradual and it happens over the years. So it's not like something happens like in women, all of a sudden at age 50, they're not getting periods and they're getting hot flashes. It's kind of hard to miss that. But for
When does it
men,
start happening with men? When typically does it start?
it's gotten earlier and earlier. I
Probably
would
because
have
all the reasons you mentioned before.
all of those other reasons. But yeah, I mean, it used to be I would see men in their 50s and 60s, but I'm seeing men, even I have some patients, some male patients in their 30s with low testosterone, a lot of them in their 40s. And there's a lot of theories about that, but it has to do with, toxins and food. Although the food is not necessarily as much of an issue for the men. I think it has to do with what's called xenoestrogens, which are chemicals that get into our ecosystem that they act on the estrogen receptors. And I think that they cause changes in the male brain so that then the brain doesn't send the right signals for the testicles to make testosterone. So I see men sometimes in their 30s who have a testosterone of 200. And, my range, I always say, is I like it at least 500, if not close to 1,000, based on how old you are. So for a young guy who's supposed to be in his prime, to have a testosterone of 200 is awful, and it's just unsustainable. So yeah, typically it's going to be just fatigue. And it's interesting because the guys will notice low sex drive, but they don't come in saying that. They just say, I'm just tired. I just don't have the drive.
Yes.
I just don't really want to do anything. And well, do you have irritability? Yeah, I suppose my wife would say I'm kind of irritable. Guys are falling asleep on the couch at 8 o'clock at night, and then they stop working out because they don't really have that motivation to go work out, and then that makes it worse because without testosterone, you lose muscle mass also, or you just don't build muscle. So then you are not as strong physically, and you're not as motivated to go work out to maintain your muscle mass. And so those are the physical symptoms. But in terms of sexual health, what happens is that men just kind of stop initiating and stop asking. And, some women say, hey, honey, what's going on? But a lot of them are like, oh, good, he's leaving me alone. And that doesn't get addressed really early. At least you would know more than I do, since you work with couples more closely on that. But I think that a lot of times that's kind of buried. And again, it comes back to men feeling like, well, I can't perform. What kind of man am I? And they feel like a failure. And if there's any other issues in the relationship where they don't feel that real sense of being connected and able to talk about it, they just don't want to bring it up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you are correct. That is true. And it'll start with this idea that I could fail, this fear that goes through, and then they'll start to withdraw. One, they don't have the drive, they don't have the initiative and all that, but also there's a fear that, well, maybe I won't be able to close the deal.
Exactly.
And if that's a possibility, well,
Not even going to try.
Don't want to try. Which then means, that goes, well, we're not going to be touching. We're not going to be holding hands, not going to be, showing signs of physical affection at all, which is easily interpreted by the other spouse as you don't care.
Right. You don't love me anymore. You don't find me attractive.
You got something else going on.
Well, I can see too how like the enemy can easily start to have his way in all of that, because it from listening to you, what I'm hearing you say is a man's identity can easily become that I am a failure. And so it's like it becomes it's actually a hormonal issue, but it becomes an identity issue. That I am now a failure as a man who cannot do all these things I've always been able to do. And that's dangerous territory.
It is. Well, the interesting thing is when I see a male and they come in and then we do their testing and I say, oh, gosh, yeah, your testosterone is 180. How are you functioning? And it's like, they're like, so it's not my fault. It's not me, And I tell them, no, I can't tell you exactly why you have this level right now, what's led up to it. But it's not your fault that you don't want to, do all these activities and you're losing intimacy with your wife. We can fix this. And just the relief on their faces is just beautiful. And then, of course, when I boost their testosterone and I see them in follow-up, they're like, yeah, I feel great now.
Yeah.
It's dramatic.
Yes.
So it returns them to who they're supposed to be.
Yes, I love that. So what does hormone replacement therapy look like for men?
For men, it is a lot more straightforward. So, all of
Shocker.
I know our husbands have been telling us for years, you're so complicated. They're right.
Yes.
For men, it is typically testosterone therapy. And then, of course, sometimes we have to address adrenal health and cortisols and some other metabolic things with it. And the testosterone, we have to watch some other hormones like dihydrotestosterone and estradiol because there can be some spillage of testosterone over to these other things. So we got to kind of watch doses. But for men, it's just basically how do we get testosterone in your system? And there's a couple ways to do it. But the one that's really cool that a lot of people don't know about is, especially in younger men, if you don't actually want to go on testosterone and possibly stay on it indefinitely, we can use a medication called clomiphene, which this is not FDA approved, it's off label, but clomiphene is a pill used in fertility clinics for women to help induce ovulation when they're going to be doing procedures. But we can use it in low doses for men. And what it does is it tricks your brain into making more of these hormones called luteinizing hormone that tells your testicles, hey, let's make more T. So it causes your body to make more of your own natural testosterone. And it's a pill. So it's affordable and it's easy to do. And for most men, if you're not on Medicare yet, it works really well and it can work for years. And now it doesn't typically work in somebody who's over 70 because of just the aging process.
Right.
Sure.
But clomiphene is a great way that a lot of times we start men. And then at some point, if it doesn't give us the results that we need, then we have to go on testosterone. And there are commercial products out there. They're bioidentical. There's creams and gels and things that you can do topically. And I always tell people, they have some effect and they're better than nothing. I typically don't prescribe them because by the time someone has come to see me, they've already tried those things from their primary care and it hasn't given them the results that they want. So I typically will use testosterone injections or pellets. Those are the two different ways we do testosterone in men. Both of them are bioidentical. It's just a matter of convenience and cost, but they can both get your testosterone level up to a nice, healthy, youthful level, and it's sustainable for years.
That is so great.
That
and
is great.
I love that. And I do want to mention this too, because I know you've talked with us about that as far as because we do know, and I know Chris has worked with some men, in sessions and stuff who have gone to their doctors, because that's one of the first things we will do when we have suspicion that, hey, this might be going on, go see your doctor. But they'll come back and their doctors are like, well, they said my numbers were fine, but they're like 10 points above, and so.
Or it's like the range, and it's crazy. It's like the range is, and I'm going to butcher this, but it's like 50 to 900. And they're coming up like, my doctor said I'm 51, so I'm okay.
So you're normal,
and so,
right?
So really there is a degree to where you have to really monitor their symptoms too.
Yes. Yeah, that's a good point because I do have probably a majority of my new male patients have had that exact same thing happen. They go see their doctor, get their test, and like, oh, he said he was normal. And when I look at it, I'm like, no, that's it. Maybe my joke is it's kind of like in 6th grade, you take a science test and you get a 62 and the teacher says, yay, you're normal. You passed. Like, no, this is a D-.
Right.
I'm shooting for A. We've got some work to do.
It just means you didn't fail.
Right. Yeah. So for those guys, it's like, well, yeah, you got enough to live and you're not going to get, bone thinning, but it's not anywhere near enough to be optimal. And so I do that's why, my reference range for whatever it's worth is roughly 500 to 1,000. And the labs have different reference ranges, and Quest, I think, is in the upper 200s now, and it changes. So yeah, I mean, if your level is 350, but you have fatigue and no sex drive, and you're gaining weight and you're depressed, that's not good enough. It's just not, and we can fix it. So why live with those symptoms because your level is normal when we're really shooting for optimal health?
Yeah.
Right. I love that idea of normal
the
and
abundant
optimal
life is really what we're
yes,
looking
the abundant
for.
life. That's it. So I love this. I think this has been so beneficial, and it is life changing. It is marriage changing, and we are 50 or even a little bit younger. It's way too young to start feeling so fatigued and drained and unmotivated. You have so much life left God willing, after that stage. And these should be, there used to be a time where these were called our golden years, because they used to be like the good years. And now we shouldn't be in slumps and all of these things. And so I love that. And so I think if you're listening and you're thinking, because I made a list of some questions, where I was feeling these things. And I know I have talked with a lot of people. And so I just want to speak clearly to anybody who's feeling like I'm losing myself. I don't feel like, I am who I've always been. I have anxiety for no reason. It's not extra stress in my life. It's just that internal anxiety. Everything's irritating me. My memory's bad. I can't remember anything anymore. I have no energy. I don't want to work out anymore. For the guys who are just like sitting around, and you almost feel like your body is betraying you in a sense. And like none of that is normal. That it may be normal for somebody going through hormonal decline, but it's not optimal by any means.
Right.
And what you're saying is that optimal is achievable. And like we need to, and if you come up against a doctor who's not willing to help you, go find another one. I know that is super hard, and it's frustrating when you have to advocate for yourself, but that is the world we live in now. And so it is worth it. I don't feel like there's ever a reason we should be settling for like a less than optimal life, because there are physicians that are wonderful like you out there, and there is somebody who is willing to help, but these are problems that can be fixed. Like going to see you, it literally fixed those problems for me. It took away the symptoms. And yes, as I got closer to menopause, we had to tweak some things and all that, but we did it. We did it. And I suffered for a little while, but then I'm all regular, regulated and stuff now. And I think this was one of my biggest questions, and I know I had brought it to you as well, but I think so many women are asking this is, will I ever feel normal again? So what is your answer to that? Like the menopausal woman, the perimenopausal, am I ever going to feel normal again?
I think that's a great question. Of course, everybody's definition of normal is different. But I think that the way to reframe it is, how close to God's will for me can I feel? So what can I do to continue to strive for what God's best is for me? And if we're not quite at what we think God has for us, keep going. I mean, there's no shortage of what God can do for us and what he wants for us. The shortage is usually in our faith. We read things, we get doubtful, and we speak negative things, and we're not sometimes as good at receiving God's gifts as we should be. And we know the word says, "Beloved, I wish that you would be in health, even as your soul prospers." So, it's in 3 John. So we know that it's God's will for us to be in health. So if something is not feeling right, then just continue to try to figure it out. And then just to zoom out a little bit, I do always tell some of my new patients that hormones are a very important piece of the puzzle, but there are other pieces of the puzzle as well. So, for example, if you're eating that terrible diet filled with fast food, your hormones are never going to work optimally. So you can't disregard nutrition. You can't disregard exercise, especially as we get older. We can't take that for granted.
True.
And then sometimes there are other overlying conditions. So let's say you have an autoimmune disease and you've got Sjogren's syndrome or rheumatoid arthritis, then that may cause, for example, some joint pain that the hormones can't fix, or other conditions. So I think it's a matter of just continually striving and reaching for the next step, the next goal, and just asking God for help in that journey, because it is a journey towards better health.
Yeah. And we're not stuck here.
No, you're never stuck. Never stuck. There's always more that you can do. And even when we come to the end of what we can do as patients, or me as a physician, then he's always there, and he can always do way more than what we can imagine.
Yes, I love that. I think that is a good closing line. And so I hope if you have been listening and your marriage has been struggling, you've been struggling individually, as a man, you've been struggling, I hope this has helped you connect some dots and know that, this is a place to start, because you don't want to lose your marriage over this. You don't want to lose your mental or emotional well-being over this. And so this is a great thing. And it is God's design for our hormones to change over time. But it's also, like you said, God's designed for us to function optimally, and we can get help in that area, and that help can be life-changing. I know it has been for me, and I am so grateful, to you and to the Lord for leading me to you, and the fact that you were a believer as well. I was like, this is like the Dr.
Hallelujah.
Jackpot. Yes, it's so great, and I love that. And if you are here local and you happen to live in the Carolinas, we're going to have Dr. Reis's information for you. That's all going to be in our show notes or down below. But if not, go find a doctor like her that can get you the help you need. And regardless, we're going to have her website. Go look at her website, even if you're not local. She's got great videos, great articles, great information on there. Where she'll reiterate some of the stuff she shared on here that you can read about, because inform yourself. You need to have the information and the education.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that. I want to live that optimal life. Thank you for helping me do that. And I hope that this episode is going to help others do that. So thank you so much for not only helping me immensely, but now I got to have you here to help our audience as well, our listeners. So I'm so grateful for that. So thank you so much for giving us your time and your wisdom today.
You're more than welcome, and it's been my pleasure not only to know you, but to help you in your journey, and hopefully this can help a lot of other people get to that place.
Amen. Amen.